Talking sports with Nooner and Force back at you once again, 1 week after Thanksgiving. Brad, I had a little bit of Thanksgiving, but it was over with. Or I had a little bit of Thanksgiving leftovers, I should say. It was completely gone by Monday. Do you still have any leftovers left?
Oh no, but thank goodness we did because our refrigerator went out this past weekend. So while we are gone, so yeah, we had no fridge right now. That's oh wait, we had no microwave either. It blew up a couple weeks ago. Uh, so it's almost like the Auburn defense how they feel right now. Everything's just blown up to pieces.
Tom, just how stupid can I don't understand that. How
Well, we're
fourth
gonna
and
discuss
goal,
it.
fourth and goal, and you're like, what was it? Fourth and goal from where?
The 31-yard line.
And you give up a deep corner pass.
And 9 on 5 because I only rushed two.
It's, I don't get it. I don't know. I don't know. I think any high school defense would have been able to guard that.
Well, yeah, of course. Well, yeah, the thing about it is, all the players need to be at the goal line. Well, throw underneath. They probably would have thrown underneath, tried to lateral it a bunch of times and everything else. But I mean, if you just go guard the goal line, it would have been okay.
Oh
So they're my
goodness.
DA Hall of Fame. So that's for
Yeah.
that. So we'll discuss.
Yeah, they definitely should be DA Hall of Fame because they could have really um made it very interesting, even more interesting this weekend, considering we have the rest of excuse me, considering that we have the rest of the conference championship games going on this weekend. We will get to that later. There are only a couple of things on my agenda today, Brad. This coming weekend is one of them with conference championships, and I think we exactly know where we're going to go first.
Yep,
Brad,
I think so.
this past weekend, I saw two things happen that I never thought I would see again in my life. CM Punk coming back to WWE and Bobby Petrino coming back to Arkansas as the offensive coordinator. If you if let's just say if you and I were betting men and we would have said what are the odds of that happening, I would have told you that. Now CM Punk coming back doesn't shock me near as much as what Petrino coming back to Arkansas does. Let's get that out of the way. Wrestling, we see this all the time with wrestling. Wrestlers will come and go. They'll have beefs with Vince McMahon, and
Yeah.
and it does prove it, especially in the wrestling world. Time heals all wounds. But this was something different because Bob Petrino didn't leave for another job. He was fired. He was fired by the
Yep.
University of Arkansas, and he was
Fired
brought
for
back.
cause.
Fired
Fired
for
for cause. It
cause.
should. It should have. It should have.
And I disagree. I still to this day believe there should have been a way around that. I'm sorry, there is.
Ethics
It's
101.
here you also have to see my side though, Brad, because at the time, yes, at the time it was a little bit different. Jeff Long was still brand spanking new into the role. He didn't want to, be that athletic director that said, okay, we're going to tolerate this. And I understand that. I do.
Mhm.
But yes, he was fired for cause. And I read an article saying that there's a few others that would have to approve him coming back. And so,
And
and
apparently that has happened.
apparently that has happened. So,
Yeah.
number one, I'm ecstatic. I am so ecstatic about this. And it's not just because now I don't think him coming in right off the bat is going to solve every problem that we have. But if you
Yeah.
saw what he did with the Texas A&M offense, I can't remember what they were ranked last year, but it was in the hundreds. I don't know the exact ranking, but I know this year they were 24th in the nation in offense.
They were.
Our biggest issue is offense. Our defense was fine except for the Missouri game, which we're not going to discuss that again. So the one thing I like about this, there's a few things I like about this. Number one, I don't know if him coming in is going to fix things right off the bat, but at least it gives our fans kind of hope because we're bringing in a guy. He knows the Arkansas culture. He knows the Arkansas fan base. He knows what they expect. And he's our guy. Like he's the guy that took our football program at one point and we won back-to-back 10-win seasons for the first time since the 60s.
Yeah.
But there's one other thing, Brad, I love about this. And it's something that goes back to his interview that he did with David Basil, which I think was 3 or 4 years ago. I can't remember the exact date or anything like that, or exact year or anything like that. But the one thing he said during his interview was how much he regretted how it ended. And he was so thankful that the state of Arkansas still treated him and his family the exact same way as they did before the incident happened. And he was very, very grateful for it. So I think, and you could almost say this with CM Punk. It's a little bit different because it's the WWE and it's a different business. But he's been given a chance that nobody else gets. He's been given a second chance to come back and make it right. And you and I both know that we may only have him for 2 or 3 seasons. And if we do succeed, he may go elsewhere. But in the whole general things, you don't see this in sports very often. You don't see a situation that he was in and said, "Hey, let's bring him back and let's let him make this right." And I truly believe I truly believe everything that he has said so far is genuine about him coming back. And I love the article I read on ESPN. Tyler Wilson is all for this, by the way. And not only Tyler Wilson, but I've heard other stories that I know people that have season tickets. They were not going to renew their season tickets.
Yeah.
Petrino's news broke out. They renewed their tickets.
Yeah.
And so I'm ecstatic about this. There's two things real quick, Brad. I'll let you speak. 2 things. Number one, Alex said something last night on ATFS because we record ATFS on Tuesdays. One thing that he said, and it kind of makes me scratch my head. Number one, could this be a scapegoat for Hunter Yurachek? And it would make sense if it was. Because if Sam Pittman doesn't perform next year, you and I both know if he gets fired in the middle of the season, you and I both know who's going to be the interim head coach right off the bat.
Yeah.
So
I was going to get there.
And you and I both know we've seen a ton of sports in Arkansas that have succeeded, that have seen this huge success. But football has got to get it right because football is the most revenue. It draws the most fans. Revenue, whole 9 yards, you name it. It's the most revenue sport. To me, this could be a desperate situation for Hunter Yurachek. You know, coming in and everything like that. The second thing, does this make sense? Does this hire make sense? And I'm not talking about just the offense in general. I'm talking about does Petrino and Sam Pittman, does it make sense? Will they be able to work together and collide? Now, in some ways, Brad, this reminds me of when Houston Nutt and Gus Malzahn were together. The only difference is Gus Malzahn was forced in the University of Arkansas. He did not hire Gus Malzahn. Sam Pittman did hire. Sam Pittman did agree. Let's bring in Bobby Petrino. So answer those questions while you're giving your thoughts.
So I was going to get into the Sam Pittman thing. I'll address CM Punk in a minute because but I will say this. Bobby Petrino being back at Arkansas, that did not surprise me. Couple of things. Number one, seeing Bobby Petrino just become the offensive coordinator early in the season and seeing Sam Pittman having issues early in the season, especially after BYU loss and started having those string of losses, my mind kept on wondering, wouldn't it be funny that full circle Bobby Petrino is back at Arkansas, has the
Well, we
coach?
mentioned this. We mentioned
Yeah,
this.
and I mentioned it. I said, I think Bobby Petrino is a candidate. I said that. I said that on the show. I said, I think he could be a reliable candidate for the University for the head coaching job. Well, so when Jimbo Fish was fired and when Herm Yurchek said Sam Pittman coming back, I said, I know who the next OC is. It's Bobby Petrino. It's Bobby Petrino. I said, it just makes too much sense to me because number one, Bobby Petrino has been very repentant about how it ended at Arkansas, like you said. Number two, I do believe he should have been fired because, as a former state Arkansas employee myself, every Arkansas State employee has to sign an ethics clause that states that you have to disclose any relationship you have with a coworker, subordinate, etc. And it does say that not disclosing it would mean not being dishonest, which would mean termination. So it's been in policy for years. You like it or not?
It's a policy.
That's
I
why.
agree.
Yeah, so that's why I said per policy, he should have been fired. But I've also said time does heal wounds. And I'm for this hire too, Ricky. I'm actually for it myself. And I will say this. I think, no, when that happened, like I said, I think Bobby's going to be the next offensive coordinator. So when it was announced that Bobby Petrino was coming back, it just reaffirmed what I thought from the beginning that somehow Bobby Petrino was coming back to Arkansas. And he made a statement today via ESPN saying he wants to make it right. He realizes there are people that still doubts him, that does not want him there. He understands that. He understands that clearly. But he said, the reason why I took this job, he said, this has been a dream of mine to come back to make it right once and for all. And he has that opportunity to do that. But let's go to Sam Pittman real quick, because I think it's very interesting. So after Friday's game, the last two SEC games, Arkansas has been outscored 96-24 in the last two SEC games played at home, 96-24.
Goodness.
And so after the game, Trey Biddy, like I said, I like Trey Biddy. I know some people don't like Trey
Good
Biddy.
dude. I
some
love
people
Trey
do.
Biddy.
I like Trey Biddy. I like his walking talks. It's fun. It's kind of funny. So his walking talks are, if you ever listen to him. But anyway, he asked a very important and simple question. And it was a very simple one. And he asked Sam Pittman this: how do you get momentum entering next season? Very simple question. Sam Pittman's response was, I don't know. Next question. Well, Bobby Petrino definitely brings that momentum. In a new NIL deal, in a new NIL program they announced yesterday also brings some momentum. However, we got a lot of I don't know from Sam Pittman in his press conferences. The first thing Bobby should tell Sam Pittman when they get into the room together is don't ever tell the press, or especially when the whole state is looking at you, I don't know. Make up some crap. I don't care. Give me some coach speak. I don't care. I do not want to hear you say I don't know anymore in a dang press conference. I don't want to hear that. Now that's my rant on that. But you made some good points. I think it's going to be okay because I think Bobby Petrino has humbled himself enough to realize that he's not the head coach. But also, I think Bobby Petrino also realized not only is he there because of his offensive genius, because I do think he's an offensive genius as far as play calling and everything else, but he's also there to help Sam Pittman coach this team. Because remember, Barry Odom was hired for the same reason too. And of course, the year after Barry Odom leaves, which is this year, you hear Sam Pittman say, I don't know, on a 4th and 1. Well, I don't know what, I didn't know what to do. Well, that's because he probably didn't have anybody to turn to really answer that question. Well, he had Barry Odom the year before to turn to. Well, this year he's going to in this coming year he's going to have Bobby Petrino to turn to ask those questions. So yes, I do think it'll work out in that regard. Now, here's the deal, Ricky. The first 4 games, the 2 of those first 4 games, Ricky, is against Oklahoma State. 2 of those games in Texas A&M. I'm going to say this, Ricky. I truly believe that Sam Pittman needs to win one of those games to at least put some faith back with the fans. He needs to win at least one of them, either A&M or Oklahoma State, because if he doesn't, I think Sam Pittman's really in trouble, and I do think he could get fired at the end of the season or before or the middle of the season. So obviously, the interim coach would be Bobby Petrino,
There's
because
just no
that
other
would be the only
choice.
person you could. He had no other choice at that point in time. So to me, Ricky, I think it makes sense. I think it's a good hire. I think it's worth a try. I do think Bobby wants to make it right. I think Bobby wants to make things right, and I think this probably could be his last job too. If I had to think on it, I mean, he could go somewhere else, but if Sam Pittman's fired, no, turning the reins over back to Bobby Petrino, I wouldn't see that out of the realm of possibility. To be honest with you, I mean, I know how people think he ended, but Bobby Petrino also had that period where he had that, like you say, one of the great runs in Razorback history, and maybe he deserves a second chance. I'm not saying he does. I'm not saying he doesn't, but I can see that. So your 2 questions was, could Bobby Petrino and Sam Pittman work? I do think that, because I think Sam Pittman's also humble enough. I don't think he's like Houston Nutt, because Houston Nutt was a control freak. Houston Nutt was a control freak, and Houston Nutt took the play calling over back from Gus Malzahn, and I think that's what got Gus and Sire with the University of Arkansas, because Gus was hired there to take over the play calling, and when Houston Nutt took it back over from him, nobody stood up and said, "No, no, Houston, we told you you're not calling plays anymore." They just allowed Houston to do what he wanted to at that point. That's number one. But I don't think that's going to be Sam, because Sam Pittman has always allowed his coaches to coach their to coordinate their defense, to coordinate their offense. Now, I think Sam probably had some say so on certain situations, on situational football, but as far as coaching itself, I think Sam Pittman allows his coaches to coach. So I don't think that's going to be a big deal there. Number two, I do think this is a scapegoat for Hunter Yurchek, because with this, Hunter Yurchek is now saying, "Well, Sam, I'm giving you all the tools. You got to go out there and perform." And also too, like you say, Hunter Yurchek also had to go the extra mile to get this hire done for Sam Pittman, because, like you say, he had to get approval from certain people for this hire to happen, because Bobby Petrino was fired for cause. So again, I don't think Hunter Yurchek's job will be in jeopardy next year per se, but I don't. But if Sam Pittman does not succeed next year, I do not think Hunter Yurchek's going to have the say so, the sole say so on who's the next head coach is. He'll probably have to go with a committee. He probably have to go with a group of people to hire the next coach. And I would say this: I think so. So for me, I think Hunter Yurchek's job is safe. But like you say, though, football is the moneymaker at any school, or most schools for that. There's only very few schools where basketball outdraws football. But you're talking about the blue bloods like Duke and Kansas and Kentucky, the blue bloods of basketball. That's the only schools where basketball outdraws football. But other than that, football is probably is the moneymaker for Arkansas, and Arkansas needs to get it together. Or, you could also say or Yurchek's job could be in jeopardy too. But I don't think so per se because of all the other sports. But again, I think this is an opportunity for Arkansas to get it right finally, and I'm looking forward to this next season. I'm excited about it. I say let's roll on with Bobby, see where we go. The defense was great, was good, wasn't great, but it was better than last year. So I like to think the defense will improve along with that. And so if you can have the offense and defense clicking, why can't we win 8 or 9 games next year? So so good hire. I think Bobby being back in Arkansas, I'm not surprised by it. And you mentioned CM Punk earlier. I'm not surprised by CM Punk being back in the locker room or being back with the WWE because this has been rumored for months too. I think the only thing that CM Punk, it's like I told you, Ricky, CM Punk is like the ultimate warrior, except for he has talent. That's the only difference. CM Punk, nobody really likes CM Punk. Nobody. But CM Punk is a heck of a talent. And if he can just humble himself and work with the talent around him and to be cordial, don't have to like everybody, just be cordial. I think CM Punk has the opportunity to finish up his career on a high note and finish it out like he should. And it can be another Shawn Michaels story because remember, Shawn Michaels in the '90s he was a butt. You know when he was on the drugs and all
Yeah.
about that, and nobody liked Shawn Michaels. Undertaker said, "I hated Shawn Michaels," but at the end of the day, when Shawn Michaels, he turned to God, when he got his life straightened out, he came back to the WWE. Everybody loves Shawn, and guess what? Shawn's still there today, helping talent and everything else, helping young talent. And so it can be another Shawn Michaels story if CM Punk would just humble himself and would just, work with the talent around him and not be a total butt.
So
But again, I'm not surprised with either one of those hires.
so addressing CM Punk,
Mm.
I'm starting to wonder how credible AEW was toward him because the whole thing is when you get in trouble with the company and Vince McMahon and Triple H okay you to come back, WWE has a zero tolerance for stuff like that. So I'm wondering how credible AEW was with the reason they fired him to begin with.
Well, I don't know. I mean, if you look at the Ultimate Warrior, for example, Ultimate Warrior gave these unbelievable demands on Vince McMahon. Vince McMahon fired him right after he walked through the curtain at SummerSlam. He literally fired him. He says, "You're going to give this to me? You're fired. You're out of here." And then rehired him back. And then he started missing shows and everything else. And like you said, there's been many wrestlers before that said terrible things about WWE only for Vince McMahon to hire them back because, like the Mr. McMahon slogan, this is Vince's slogan too. It's best for business. It's best for business to have these people back because they were popular. And so, I mean, I see where you're going with that. And Ricky, I'm not going to say I disagree with you because AEW has some issues right now themselves going on, but
Mm-hmm.
but just knowing CM Punk's past and seeing how a lot of the wrestlers have reacted to this return, it seems like to me CM Punk's more of the problem than the organization. Not just from seeing everything, but we'll see. Hopefully, like Bobby Petrino, you want to comparing the two real quick. He'll have some humility. He'll come back, want to make things right, and he'll want to come back to end things on a high note.
And he needs to because this is it
Mhm.
for CM Punk. This is
Yeah,
it. He's getting old.
absolutely. I
And
agree.
so this is his last straw, and he knows. Like he should deep down know that this is it for him. Like there's no turning back. There's no going back to AEW. AEW.
Mm-mm.
No, he's done. Um, and like I said, I'm questioning the integrity of AEW just for the simple fact is there's a reason Cody Rhodes left, and Cody Rhodes is one of the original ones who started it. They had another original guy who started up with it. He just left. And I can't remember what his name was. I read the article today. And now, of course, CM Punk, which CM Punk got fired, but at the same time, it's like this, Brad. I don't think Vince McMahon and Triple H pull the trigger unless someone else that's more credible than CM Punk gave the go ahead and say, hey, there's more to it than what actually happened. Go ahead and hire him. And so, but I've seen a lot of positive reaction. I know there's going to be negative reaction because you and I both know some of the superstars that are working today who have been working. They know how good he is. And I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know if you watched his promo Monday night, but he hasn't missed a beat.
Oh no.
He hasn't missed a single beat. And he started bringing up some of the stuff he said in his pipe bomb, the pipe bomb that he had. I think it was like 2011 or something like that. His pipe bomb promo. He brought some of that stuff back, and I'm like, oh gosh, this is so good. But yeah, last straw for him. But we'll see how it goes. Basically with both sports. Anything else on Petrino or CM Punk before we move on?
Well, see, just real quick, and I don't disagree with you about AEW because there's some issues, and I'm not saying it's all CM Punk, but his history just shows that that CM Punk has had some issues, locker room issues, and others issues with management before. And again, it's an opportunity for him to ride the ship and everything else. And one more thing about Bobby Petrino, real quick. And you mentioned his when he was at the Little Rock Touchdown Club in 2019, and of course he has made the trip since to Fayetteville with Missouri State and everything else. I think fans needs to realize both of those times that Bobby Petrino had got the chance to speak about Arkansas, it's always been about, I wish I could make this right somehow. I mean, just the tone of how his talk about Arkansas was. It was always about, I wish there was some, I mean, just read between the lines. I wish I could make this right somehow, in some way. Bobby Trio has a chance to make it right. I hope he does. And I pray that he does because I think Bobby Petrino is a great offensive mind, and I think he could be a huge asset for Sam Pittman, helping him bring the Hogs back to where it needs to be. So,
absolutely, and I agree. I really agree. I really hope that I really hope they're able to work together, and because I mean that's the one thing that worries me though is if they do make it right and they do it together, like I wonder who because you and I both know the fans are probably going to give Bobby Petrino more credit than they will Sam Pittman.
They will.
But at the same time, though, we've seen Sam Pittman lead. We know what he's capable of.
Yeah.
But man, he just I don't know. This past couple of years, though, very, 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 very deal.
Well,
all right. So
well, real quick about Sam Pittman. I want to mention just real quick. It kind of jogged on my mind. Sam Pittman went from having a humble beginnings with an agent of Little Rock to Jimmy Sexton. And Jimmy Sexton represents everybody and all the coaches pretty much. And I understand you want to get your money and everything else, but since he's gotten the money, I mean, I don't want to question Sam Pittman's drive, but it just seems like it's a little bit different since he fired the local Little Rock lady for Jimmy Sexton. That's all I'm going to say about that.
Oh, okay. All right. So let's see here. KJ Jefferson entering the transfer portal. No surprise there. No. And to be honest with you, Brad, I think it's time we move on from him anyway. He's been great.
But agree.
But he fell well short of expectations the last couple of years. Love the kid. He's did great things, but it is time for him to move on. and we'll see what we have as far as other quarterbacks go for next season. But that'll be another deal. And I honestly think that we do have a couple of quarterbacks who are going to fit Petrino's offensive system. So we'll see how that goes. And so, from my understanding, South Carolina could be a calling for KJ Jefferson. So we'll see if that happens. Riley Leonard from Duke, QB from Duke, he also announced that he was going to go into the transfer portal. It looks like Notre Dame is a possibility for a target for him. Sam Hartman, his eligibility is officially ran out. Let's see what else.
Will Rogers from Mississippi State announced he's transferring too.
No one cares about Will Rogers.
Just say.
I was about to say, no one cares that Will Rogers is transferring. Let's see here. Spence. Oh gosh, Rattler. That's why he's Spencer Rattler is
declare for
declaring
the
for the
draft.
NFL draft.
Which is a joke.
More power to him. I mean, is it just me or does he look like that O'Doyle kid from Billy Madison?
He looks like the adult kid from Billy Madison.
He really does.
He
I'm
does.
just saying. Former Aggies quarterback Johnson, I guess it's Mac Johnson, transferring to North Carolina.
Yeah.
Other than that, everything else is about the exact same as it is. So, conference championship weekend, and we'll go through these games. We'll go through each of these games, especially some of the notable ones, as we're going along. We'll do our picks as we're going along. And so that way we can finish up the Duke. By the time we're done, Duke and Arkansas should be going into the second half. I think right now it's half. No, it's not halftime yet. You got an updated score, Brad? Are you watching it while you're doing this?
I'm not.
Really? I figured you'd be all over that TV watching it.
Not yet. No.
And so, anyways, let's see. So one thing about Duke, Brad, real quick before we get started. So, an old friend of mine that I went to middle school with, it is let's see here. Duke and Arkansas are tied at 27 according to what I've got right now. Anyway, years ago, I went to middle school with this guy's name is Blake Torres, and he is currently a pharmacist, smart as all get out, by the way. Him and his wife and his twin boys, I think they still reside in Benton. I'm not sure. And I know his wife's a volleyball coach. His dad, who I knew because he was a coach, he's still coaching, but he was a coach at the school we went to, Harmony Grove. But Blake, long story short, Blake was a huge Duke fan. And so I say that because when I saw on Facebook earlier, he was not wearing any of his Duke stuff. He's like Hogs #1 tonight. And so I'm like, here you go, Blake. But I say that for this as well. So so like Brad, I knew nothing about basketball when I was in 7th grade. Knew nothing about it. And it was the first time I ever filled out an NCAA tournament bracket. And I said, hey, who's going to win this thing? And Blake said, Duke is going to win this thing. I said, okay, I'll pick Duke to win it all. And I can't remember if Duke won it that year or if that was the year Michigan State won it. I can't remember which year it was. I want to say it was 01. I think Duke won it in 01, didn't they?
I want to say either them or it was UConn, 1 or 2. Michigan State, I think, won 2000. I would have to go back to and look at it.
Yeah, Michigan. I know Michigan State won in 2000. I think Duke did win it in 01. But I'll go back. I'll go back sometime because I think they had Shane Battier that year. I think that was Shane Battier's final season at Duke.
I think you're right. Yeah, I think you are right.
And so anyway,
I think 2000 Michigan State won it. They beat Florida actually.
Yes, they did. Yes, they did. And then Florida turns around a few years later and went back to back. Anyways, but I just found it funny. You know, he's a big Duke guy. But yeah, him and his family, they're all at the Duke game tonight. For cheering on the Razorbacks. But this is probably, excuse me. Would you say this is the biggest home game we've had in quite some time? Like I know we've played Kentucky at home several times, But we're talking about
Yeah,
the Duke Blue We're talking about the Duke Blue Devils, and I know it doesn't mean as much with Coach K being gone, but at the same time, it's like
still
it
Duke.
it, it it's still Duke.
It's still
It's still Duke.
well, the back just being able to play UNC and Duke back to back games. I mean, that's a big stretch for Arkansas. A
Has
long,
that
long
ever happened
time. That's
before?
that's I mean, no, I don't think it's ever happened before. I mean, the NCAA tournament. Of course, they played Duke in the finals and beat Duke. And then the very next year, '95, they did play North Carolina in the Final Four. I think that was Dean Smith's next to last season, if I'm not mistaken, and everything else. And they lost, of course, Arkansas lost to UCLA in the finals of that tournament. And so I guess, with Blue Bloods, I mean, that was back to back Blue Bloods that Arkansas faced that year with UCLA and North Carolina in '95. But yeah, it's a big stretch. I got to think. So I got a story to share with you about this. So, our they had a festival at the Woodlands. They call it Festival at Woodlands. It was one of the first festivals I participated here in Hot Springs Village. And of course, Hot Springs Village is filled with retired people, so there's money around. And so there's actually a Razorback Club here in the village. And of course, they donate money, to the Razorback Athletic Club and all that stuff. Yeah. So they actually invited this girl to come from she's kind of like a PR person for the University of Arkansas. So she came down here, and so her booth was next to our church booth. So when I was there, I kind of Paisley was looking at buttons for the University of Arkansas. You can make your own button that has a hog on it, everything else. And so I kind of started a conversation. So she actually comes from the Northeast, but she actually did some work at the University of North Carolina. But guess where they had her work a lot at the University of North Carolina at? The University of Duke. So it was kind of interchangeable relationship that Duke and North Carolina had. And I said, so during basketball season, who did you root for? She said, I didn't root for anybody. She said, one
Didn't
way
root
or
for
the other, I was going to
anybody.
catch a flag. So anyway, but then after that, she came to the University of Arkansas. And so anyway, I think it was like one of her first trips she's ever taken with the University of Arkansas. She just got there. But anyway, that was a funny story. But I think it's great that they're having this ACC SEC challenge. We're never going to see where Arkansas stands. And we got to. I know Musselman was very disappointed with the term Atlantis, but I think that double overtime game against Stanford really did Arkansas in. And they just felt tired, especially against North Carolina at the end. They had a close game against Memphis. Of course, North Carolina kind of blew them out in the second half, so they just looked tired. Hopefully, they're rested. And, they got the halftime lead 33-32 at halftime.
Yep.
Arkansas does. So hopefully, second half, they'll continue the momentum. But I think, yeah, I would say this is definitely the biggest home game. I mean, it's definitely up there. I think the other game that people would point out too was when Arkansas beat North Carolina in Pine Bluff back in the, and of course that's when Michael Jordan's senior year that year
Yep.
when North Carolina came down. So I think that would be the only other game I would say probably that would measure up to this game. But yeah, definitely the biggest game in Fayetteville for sure for any team, I would say. But I would say that this game, and probably when the early '90s when Rick Pitino's Kentucky team, which was number one, came into Arkansas. I think Arkansas was ranked number two, number three, and Arkansas defeated Kentucky at Barnhill that year. I think that would be another game that people would point out too as well. So there have been several big games, but yeah, this is definitely, I would say, definitely top five for sure. Definitely top five as far as big games.
All right. That's yep. All right, let's go through some of these conference championship games. This is going to be a big football weekend, Brad. I'm looking forward to it. This one does not have any playoff implications to it. New Mexico State versus Liberty. I think New Mexico State's only loss was Liberty, if I'm not mistaken.
I think they're 9-3. If I'm not mistaken, 9-3 or 10-2, 1-2. But
I mean, their
they,
only conference loss. I'm sorry.
yeah, yeah, I get, I got you. I
Mhm.
think, boy, this is tough because Liberty's actually not have been bad. Of course, they got mostly Hugh Free recruited players. I'm gonna go with Liberty here because Liberty wins and Tulane loses. Liberty's gonna be in a New Year's Six bowl game because they're ranked in the top 25 of the CFP. So if Liberty wins and Tulane loses, it will be Liberty in the New Year's Six bowl. So I'm gonna go with Liberty on this one.
This one does have playoff implications. Oregon against Washington, the rematch. Rematches are typically not good. I'm going to take Oregon in this rematch. Oregon's favored by 9.5 points.
Oregon's playing better than Washington right now. I'm going to take Oregon too. And remember, Oregon lost to Washington on the last play, and that game was at Washington. This is going to be a neutral site. I think Washington's is the better team, and I would not be surprised Bo Nix win the Heisman. So Oregon over Washington.
And you just answered my second question. I was going to ask you that. I think he's won it, and I think he seals it. I think he seals it. It's not. I think he will get all the first place votes, all the second place, and I mean he'll get them all. He'll get all the votes to win the Heisman. If he does end up coming back, but yeah, this is going to be definitely huge. I do believe the winner of this gets in. I really do. What does make this interesting though, and we'll get through. We're going to go back. We'll go back to the rest of them here in a minute. Let's get through these other non ones that are not going to affect at all. Miami of Ohio versus Toledo for the conference for the this is for the MAC conference championship.
Yeah.
I'm taking Toledo. I'm taking Toledo in a close one. I think the spread is 8. I think Miami Ohio could cover that spread.
Yeah, this is actually a rivalry game with Toledo and Miami, Ohio, because both Ohio teams play Toledo too. Toledo's last 2 years been really good. I think both years they've had. I want to say Toledo finished with one loss last year too, if I'm not mistaken, or two losses, one or two. It was not many. They're going for back-to-back MAC championships, so I'm going to go Toledo as well.
Another one that has no playoff implications whatsoever is the Mount West Championship, Boise State versus UNLV. This is weird, Brad, because you had Boise State, UNLV, and San Jose State with a three-way tie, and whatever they did, they came up with this scenario where it would be Boise State and UNLV. I don't know who wins this game because, like I said, Boise State has been actually playing a little bit better than what they were. But you got what's his name over there at UNLV. I'm going to be rooting for him too.
Well, you see, of course, they went by computer rankings because UNLV had a chance to clinch their number one seed outright, but they lost to San Diego State. So they ended up tying with San Diego State, Boise State, and UNLV. But they went with computer rankings. So the rankings came up with Boise State versus UNLV, apparently. Of course, Boise State seems like they play better when they have an interim coach because the last coach they fired, it was an interim before he got the head coaching job. This guy here, he's led Boise State. Look, looks like they're going to go bowling and everything else. But I like Barry Odom. I mean, I'm a Barry Odom guy. He's 46 years old. He's a young guy too, as well. He's only 46, although he looks like he's like in his 50s. But but he is only 46 years
That'll
old. But
do
I'm
you.
gonna go with. But I'm gonna go with Barry Odom and UNLV. I think they get it done. I think they get it done with the Mountain West. And if Sam Pittman gets fired, I mean that's another name you need to watch out for as a candidate for the University of Arkansas job. I mean, I thought he would be a great candidate this year, to be honest with you. But I'll go Barry Odom UNLV in this game.
AAC championship game, SMU versus Tulane. Both of them undefeated in conference, I should say. Tulane only has one loss on the year overall. SMU has two overall. Golly, this is going to be good too. You could go to New Orleans to Yellowmard Stadium and watch this game for as low as $10, ladies and gentlemen. So if you want to go to New Orleans to watch this game for $10, go right ahead. Um,
It's
I
gonna
don't
be a good
know.
game. It'd be
I'm taking
um
Tulane.
I will take Tulane too, only because they're playing at home. But SMU is actually a very good team, and they played a close one earlier this year against Oklahoma. Although the score doesn't indicate that, but they played Oklahoma pretty tough. They lost 28-11. Of course, their other loss was to TCU, which that's a rivalry game. Of course, TCU is in a bigger conference than they are, so they should win per se. But that's their only two losses was against Big 12 teams per se. And of course, SMU next year is going to the ACC. So another ACC team. Again, nothing that makes sense, Ricky. Now, nowhere near the Atlantic Ocean at all. We're in the middle of Texas, middle of Dallas, Texas. But hey, we're going to put ourselves to the ACC because you know why? Because that's who we are these days. That's what college football is about. But I'm going to go Tulane because they're playing at home. I think Tulane gets it done, and they will play in their second straight New Year's Six bowl game.
Sunbelt Appalachian State versus Troy. Should I root for Coach Newell's football program there? Of course, Coach Newell's in the softball program, but you get my drift.
Yeah, I get your drift, and of course, again, thanks to DAs like the NCAA, this should be James Madison in this game, not Appalachian State.
Yep.
But again, the NCAA are just a bunch of DAs. That's what they do because they like to make life miserable for everybody. But I'm gonna go with I am gonna go with Troy. I think Troy is the better team. Troy over Appalachian State.
Appalachian State will bust them out. All right, let's see here. The rest of these have playoff implications on the line. So here are, let me look at this real quick. Where did it go? Here we go. Here are the college football playoff rankings right now. You've got Georgia, Michigan, Washington, Florida State that rounds out the top four. You have Oregon, Ohio State, Texas, and Alabama. Those are the top 8. And those are the only 8 who have a chance to get in.
Yeah.
All of these games have implications. Let's start with the Big Ten, Michigan and Iowa, because it'd be very interesting if Iowa ends up beating Michigan, because when you start looking at these top tier teams that are in the top 4 losing, it raises the question of where they're going to be ranked at because they're not going to be a conference champion. So I'm just saying it's going to be I'm hoping this weekend turns inside and out. I really do. But
I do too.
Michigan and Iowa, I'm going to take Michigan because I think the running game is just that good. But Iowa's defense, Brad, I'm telling you, I've said this all year. If Iowa had any kind of an offense, everybody would be screwed, including Georgia.
I agree, but that's why I'm also taking Michigan because Iowa does not have an offense. But you're right. You could have all 3 undefeated teams, 3 of the 4 undefeated teams lose, and all of a sudden you got yourself some chaos. But at the same time, though, I would say personally, the 3 these undefeated teams, at least I think Georgia and Michigan has locked in a spot if things fall into place where you have Florida State losing as well. I would say Florida State would have to lose to make that possible. Because, and the reason why I say that is because with Georgia and Michigan, you could argue they played an extra game over Ohio State. That's
right.
Number 1. Number 2, I think with Florida State, they are judged a little differently because they're playing with a backup now. If Travis Hunter was healthy, then you could argue the extra game part, but they barely escaped Florida. They barely escaped Florida last week. And Florida dominated that game mostly, but of course, Florida State did pull it out. And obviously, if Florida State wins, they're going to be in. So, but because of their backup quarterback, they're not has good, and the committee has pretty much said as much with the rankings and everything else. Although they did jump Washington this week, so
No, they're 4.
yeah, I know. What I know Florida State, but Florida State last week was 5, and Washington was 4.
Oh, okay, okay. I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and,
So
and to be honest with you, Brad, I think if Florida State, which I think Florida State will squeak by Louisville, I really do. But I think they stay
I
number
got
4
that upset.
regardless.
I got that as upset. I think Louisville wins. I think
Hey,
Louisville beats Florida State.
okay, okay, I got you there. And if it happens, it happens. Hey, that's cool. But the one thing though, Brad, I think Florida State, regardless if they win or lose,
Yeah,
I'm sorry, well, if they lose, they're done for sure. But if they win,
yeah.
I think they stay at number 4 regardless. I think they'll have a one-loss team at number 3. I really do.
I agree with you. I actually agree with you on that. But I think they are in. But I think because of them having a backup quarterback, unless they blow out Louisville, unless now if they blow out Louisville, there's a possible chance they get up to 3. But they would have to it would have to be a blowout.
Texas and Oklahoma State. Oh, Oklahoma State, the team we plan on going to see play Arkansas and Stillwater next year, Brad. We're going to make it happen. We're going to find a way to make it happen. So Texas and Oklahoma State, who do you got in that game?
So here's what's interesting, okay? Oklahoma State actually has a winning streak against Texas.
Yes, they
uh,
do.
and so this is a very interesting game. I'm going to go with Texas, but barely. I think Texas barely pulls it out.
That's fair. That's fair. I'm also going to take Texas too. And that's something else that's going to be interesting, Brad. Let's say Oregon beats Washington, and let's say Florida State loses. Do you put Texas over Ohio State?
Yes. And will I put Texas over Alabama? Yes, because Texas beat Alabama, and Texas is the conference champion.
Exactly. And so that's that. I would say the exact same thing. So I'm just telling you, man, there could be chaos this weekend. It'll
Oh yeah.
remind me of that year Missouri was number 1, and I can't remember who. I think Virginia or Virginia Tech was number 2, and they both ended up losing the same weekend. And LSU ended up coming from number 5 to number 1 over a technicality after losing to Arkansas. It was anyways.
Yeah, I remember.
And then the big one, Brad, Georgia against Alabama for the SEC championship. Isn't this like 4 or 5 years in a row they played each other for the SEC championship?
Except for last year, Georgia played LSU,
That's
and
right.
Georgia, of course, the 5 of the last 8 national champions has either been Alabama or Georgia. So this is very interesting. Both Alabama struggled against Auburn last week. It should have lost that game, and we all know that. But we also know that there's plenty of weird things that happens at Jordan Air at Auburn when Alabama plays at Auburn. There's it was actually the 10th anniversary of Kick Six when this past Saturday. So
Been
weird
10
things
years
happen.
already?
Yeah, been 10 years. Yeah, I couldn't believe it either. It's been 10 years. And of course, Georgia for a little while struggled against Georgia Tech. That game was close for a little while. Georgia eventually did pull away, but that game was very close too. I'm going to go with Georgia, but I'm not really confident with that pick. I'm really not. But I think Georgia does pull it out barely. But don't be surprised if Alabama beats Georgia. I would not be surprised at all. But I say Georgia pulls it out, but I'm not really. I'm not really. I don't feel good about my pick really. I will say Georgia or Alabama.
Yeah, I'm the same way, and I'm also going to pick Georgia, just for the just what you said. But I think defensively Georgia is better, and I think that's why they're going to be able to squeak by with this weekend and everything like that. So let's see here. So let's see here. We have a couple of Friday games, and then
Mm-hmm.
the rest of them are on Saturday. So we'll see. And of course, during the SEC championship game, I'll be calling a. No, wait. Let's see here. SEC champ. Yep, it's at 3 o'clock. Yeah, I'll be calling a junior high tournament down at Drew Central on Saturday, so I won't get to watch it, but I'll get to watch highlights and see how things go and everything
And
like that. So it's a
I
man,
want
what
to
a
make one more
weekend.
note. I want to make one more note. Thank God this is the last time we hear Gary Danielson call it a SEC game. Thank God. I mean, him and Chris Collinsworth has to be the two worst football commentators I've ever heard in my life. I tell you right now, they both deserve each other to be part of the DA Hall of Fame just because they have to. Okay, so for example, here's the state of the absolute obvious. Well, in order for you to get a big play, you have to snap the football. That's the kind of crap we hear from Danielson and Collinsworth. So for me, I am so glad. Now I love Brad Nessler. I love Brad Nessler, but having to work with that stooge, I mean, I'm so glad to get rid of Gary Danielson. So for that, thank God that this is the last time.
See, I don't know what everybody's problem is. I love Chris Collinsworth. I love Gary Danielson. They're
Oh
all
God!
they're hilarious.
Of
They're
course you do.
hilarious.
What?
Think about it.
What?
Think about it. They're hilarious.
Because they
They're
state the obvious.
funny. Yes.
You know what? Chris Collinsworth even got on my wife's nerves, and she don't even pay attention to football.
You'll see her on defense. He didn't guard the guy, so that's why he ran downfield.
Exactly. Chris Collinsworth is oh my goodness. Gary
Oh,
Danielson,
goodness.
thank God.
You're
And you know
killing me,
what?
man.
Another one. You know what? Another one that annoys me too. Gus Johnson of Fox. And he's got the sideline. Just shut up.
I don't hear Gus Johnson very much, so I can't
Oh
really
God.
I can't really do it.
That's another one that gets on my
Chris Collins.
everlasting nerve as well.
Chris Collinsworth. They make me laugh. He
But
he fumbled the football. That's why it's a turnover.
of course.
It's just anyways. All right, Brad. I am about done. I am out of it. So anyway, I just want to thank all of our viewers, all of our listeners.
Before you do, I do have a couple of DAs.
I was going to
So,
skip DA so next week, but okay, go ahead.
well, I have to because first of all, we got to recognize Virginia for their DA-ness for turning on the sprinklers there the Virginia Tech team photo after beating them. Of course, Virginia claimed that it was on a timer, which to me, I think it's more ironic that it happened during the team photo. But anyway, Virginia makes my first day of the week. And the second day of the week goes to the passengers of the who bought into the 3-year cruise voyage from a company called Life at Sea Cruise. You know how much a 3-year cruise would cost you, Ricky, if you pay for one? 29,000, 30 grand. You're right. $29,999. And of course, for that, people gave up their homes. But unfortunately, that 3-year cruise was announced that it was canceled. So a lot of people don't have homes to go to now. And of course, finally, my last but not least, I said this earlier, new DA Hall of Fame inductee, the Auburn Tigers defense defending 4th and 31 or 4th and goal from the 31-yard line against Alabama when it was 9-on-5.
Not still 9-on-5. Goodness gracious, that's hilarious. 9-on-5. They could have they could have changed the entire outcome for this next coming weekend, but nope,
oh yeah.
Wanted. Anyway,
no.
That is the one thing though, Brad. It's been a weird football year. We've only had one, maybe two major upsets this year. They really weren't that big of upsets.
No, it's been pretty straightforward. It has, like for example, if you look at the Big 12 on Saturday, Texas going to play Oklahoma State. Really should be Texas versus Oklahoma, but Oklahoma blew 2 games. You know that cost them. You know the Oklahoma State game. Obviously, they got beat by them. They got beat by Kansas. But if you're going to argue with anybody, and you would say who's the two best teams in the Big 12, Oklahoma State would not be in that conversation. It probably would be Oklahoma and Texas. Uh, and so that's that. And of course, Florida State. We knew they were going to be good, but you thought, but who knew Louisville would be their opponent? I mean that's the main thing there. Um, Obviously, Alabama, we saw them struggle throughout the year, and we were like, I think both me and you probably thought there's no way they're getting to Atlanta this year. No way. And they
And they
still
did.
find a way to get to Atlanta. I mean, that just gives you. Oh, here's my question to you, Ricky. So before we close out, there was an article written by an Alabama reporter. He believes that this is it for Nick Saban. Your thoughts?
Like this is his final year.
This is his final year because he wrote an article about how we could be seeing his final trip to Auburn.
I don't know. I mean, didn't he just sign an extension last year?
I want to say that or a year before. I think it might be more a year before, but of course, probably with that extension, it probably gave him some freeway to leave when he wants to on his terms. So I mean, I would
I
imagine
think
there's some leeway there.
I think one thing though, Brad, is that he's coached this team a lot different than what he has in the past. One thing I will
That's why
say,
he pointed
Brad,
out.
one thing I will say, he does look tired. Like
Yeah,
he looks exhausted. And so
yeah,
it could be if it's not this year, it'll be next year, I think. So I think it's very
yeah,
very close.
yeah. Because that's what I was thinking too. Because like you say, he looks tired. He has coached his team different. And, a lot of the fans have really been on him this year that the passion, like the old Henry Nick Saban, is not there like it used to be, like him yelling at players and everything else. But, at the same time, he deserves, if it is his last year, we all should applaud him because we just seen the greatest head coach go out. Near on top. I mean, still on top of his game. I mean, heck,
Yep.
I mean, to still be able to win at that level and still compete, and be able to compete and have chance for national championships and conference championships after this many years. I mean, that's just an amazing accomplishment in itself. So, hats off Nick Saban, if it is.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. All right, Brad. I'm going to bed.
All right.
I want to thank all the listeners. We had quite a bit of listeners last week, Brad. I don't know if you've seen the numbers yet or not. We had quite a
I
bit of
did.
listeners last week. So thank you to
Appreciate that.
everyone. Yep, thank you to everyone who listened last week. We hope you continue to listen. Tune into this weekend's SEC games. Y'all have a good weekend, and we will be back next week. Good night,
All
everybody.
right.